Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon, so should you. Enjoy your treat!
So on Twitter, somebody asked Harada, who's actually the director of Tekken and obviously the manager of the esports over at Bandai Namco, he was asked a specific question about what held SoulCalibur back and if it was a clean direction, if they would have ended up in a similar place to where Tekken is or even surpass it at that point. And Harada, who worked on both SoulCalibur and for Tekken, had a lot to say. He actually responded with about, it's a long read, so there's a lot of tidbits of information here that are really important, but I'm just going to read the whole thing so that we get the entire context, and I'm going to play some SoulCalibur gameplay in the background just so like you don't have to watch me reading the phone because I don't think that's very entertaining. But we're going to jump right into it, and this is Harada's entire response. And Harada says, okay, since it's lunchtime, let's talk a little bit about the differences between SoulCalibur, Project Soul, and Tekken Project. Before we get into that subject, you mentioned game mechanics as a prime example of how to talk about the survival of a game, but things are not that simple. In the case of fighting games, if the arcade market was in its heyday and the income was 1 coin per play was important, it was still the case, but in the home video game market, the only people who can reach an evaluation of game mechanics are those who have already purchased the game, and there the paradigm shift in the business model of games has changed in the marketing of games itself. The paradigm shift in the business model of games has changed marketing itself in games. In other words, the world of marketing has changed to a world where the question is how to create a situation where people want to buy the game before they play it, and they do buy it, and how to increase the pre-release evaluation of the number of initial sales. In talking about historical video game franchises, the shift in marketing and branding due to the paradigm shift in the business models cannot be overlooked, and many people who have been in the industry for a long time will probably agree with my simple explanation. On top of that, of course, it's important to evaluate game mechanics. It is important to have game mechanics that can be played for a long time because it's a factor that affects the sales after the initial launch, and it's a factor that will work like a body blow in the long run. However, it's too naive and innocent to point out and to leave everything else to game mechanics when talking about the survival of a game's franchise. If they are so innocent, why did that game title that was fun to play disappear? Where are those arcade titles that we were so crazy about? Where did the fighting game franchises with those great mechanics go? Why did all that fighting game with those good mechanics disappear? There are so many titles that have disappeared that don't sell despite their highly regarded game mechanics that are literally dying. People around 45 to 55 years old today should remember how many fighting games there were in the 90s. And each of them had reasonably well-received mechanics. More to the point, there must have been some titles you rated as having a much better mechanic than Tekken. Yes, the fact that a series with no good game mechanics has disappeared may be on one hand, but it should also not be the only reason. While it is true that games with better mechanics will be loved and survive longer, you are not so naive as to believe that you understand that the world is that simple. Especially in this day and age when there are so many choices of games, marketing has become more and more important as it is the key to sales. While this is a hypothetical, it is not an industry theory, as is also a theory of consequences. However, after observing the industry for 30 years, I can say that the case of fighting games, there have been many instances in which the series has stagnated or ceased to exist when a key player in the franchise leaves or disappears. And the reason for the disappearance of these key persons are often not their only problems. And in the case of SoulCalibur, I can assure you, having seen it up close and personal, that this is the case. This was not simply a matter of sales and marketing, but I can tell you that the organizational changes and decision makers at Bandai Namco had a great deal to do with it. I was one of the support personnel from planning for debugging of SoulCalibur's predecessor Soul Edge/Soul Blade, and have since served as co-director for SoulCalibur 4, but I have basically been in the position of maintaining certain distance from the SoulCalibur franchise. In the past, the SoulCalibur series had a strong leader named Yo Toriyama, who was also once the animation team leader of Tekken, and above all, the team of engineers was more knowledgeable about fighting games than Tekken, and had excellent programming skills. But the Tekken project had been called a group of outlaw since the days of the old Namco, and was a unique group in the development department, but Project Soul was an elite group, a sophisticated development team. At the dawn of the Polygon era, Namco and Sega were leading the video games industries and rivalries were intensifying. In a similar vein, the rivalry between Tekken and Tekken Project and Project Soul was intensifying. I was in the same game designer department as Yo Toriyama of Project Soul, but we had friction to the point where we fought daily. That was within the first 10 years, and then we were very close after that, by the way. He quit Bandai Namco. And Tekken and SoulCalibur were always rivals within the company as well, more so than people can imagine. The two projects had different visions, different development policies, and very different ways of thinking about the brand. It's not that we hated each other, however, there were so many rivals that it was not surprising to think so. However, even though they were very different at the time, they had a clear vision for each other. Yo Toriyama always says, there is no point in putting the needs of Tekken into SoulCalibur, and I agree with him. However, our policies clash with each other in the debate over which was a good thing for a fighting game of the same company. Whatever the case, Project Soul certainly had a leader and a staff with soul and clear vision. The enthusiasm of the game designers on site could have surpassed that of Tekken's team, and it was enough to make us feel impatient. If Project Soul had been able to maintain that structure, I sometimes wonder if things might be a little bit different today. When the paradigm shift from the arcade market to the console market occurred, SoulCalibur's console version was outperforming Tekken in the North American market and had a high technical reputation. On the other hand, Tekken had grown to be an immovable object that had earned overwhelming top income in the game market and in home use. It was a title that sold less than SoulCalibur in North America and was characterized by wide sales by many countries in all regions. SoulCalibur is always seen as having a promising future, even within Namco, and considered to be one capable of expanding beyond the realm of fighting game and rather a global perspective. Even I, at the time, had a certain appreciation for the hypothetical possibilities. However, as you all know, the industry expanded. It became larger and larger, and companies merged with each other. Bandai Namco is no exception and has changed for better or for worse. As you know, Japanese gaming companies and the IT industry do not have the same organizational systems as those found in the west of North America. There are often many presidents or directors in engineering or game designers' backgrounds, and most of them have sales background experience or are management professionals or come from banks. In other words, people with excellent organizational management skills have become decision makers. This is not a snide remark, but a fact. The one thing is for sure, they are not familiar with the game development, game branding, and the gaming community. For example, on the west coast of the US, each position has its own board of directors, but this is not the practice in Japan. As a result, what happens in the case of major game companies is that the management and operations of a game company is focused on organizational management and human capital available resources within the framework. Game developers will do their best. But what will the career roadmap for game developers? The career path of a game developer who focuses on organizational management and human capital available resources results in becoming a manager of an organization. This is a phrase that many of the leaders in each part of the Ace Combat project, both we at Tekken Project and Project Soul, have actually been asked. How long are you going to be in the field? When are you going to become a manager? And when will you be the manager of the organization? How long will you be a creator? Yeah, that was directed at director of Ace Combat. No one in the organization at the time was asking, when are you going to grow to be a great game developer? Literally not one person talked about the career path of a game developer. It was all about management and administration, and it was true that this was not an organization that could properly evaluate the content of games and their value. And becoming a manager of organization, he meant that one should not stick to one thing forever, but should broaden one's perspective to the very department, division, and business. In fact, at the time, the only way to advance one's career was under such a system. Broadening one's horizons sounded good, but in the game development, it was the opposite of pursuing a single path or mastering something. Also, at that time, the concept of job rotation was widespread based on the idea of broadening one's horizons. Growing as a manager, leading any department or any division or business, and contributing to the expansion of the company. It was originally intended for younger employees, but as a result, it was undoubtedly one of the factors that gave rise to the trend that working on one specific game or specific genre or work forever is not a career development and is not valued. Then the phenomena of people leaving various titles and series as they were being peeled off began to occur. Each time a project's key player were peeled away, the big dreams and visions of that project once held become weaker. Project Soul was struggling to survive, or so it seemed to me, especially among its younger members. However, it seems that it was difficult for them to maintain their vision, will, and organizational structure, that they are no longer the game development-centered world of the past, but rather a game development team that's just one of the businesses in a group of companies. At the same time, of course, this was happening to me in the same situation. First, the company was split into development company and publishing company, and I became one of the publishing company's members, but also head of a new department called Global Business Development, which had nothing to do with the game development. None of my subordinates were in development, they were all marketing staff. This meant that from a company organizational point of view, I was out of the Tekken project, both in terms of the company and the divisions and departments and its budget management. This was not my idea, of course, but was decided by the management at the time according to the company policy I mentioned earlier. And while this might put me on a career path, I had something else in mind entirely. I made the decision to lead Tekken project despite the fact that I was in a different company, department, and division, and had no budget authority. I practically manipulated the creative budget planning. Why? I knew that the soil and currents of such a large organization just happened from things that are happening due to the delusions caused by group mind, and the head appointed solely for the career advancement with no love for the game title and no long-term vision cannot be good for the survival of a series or fan community. And we at the Tekken Project always said that the rights to the title belong to the company, but the fan community can only rely on the team that has the will to make the game. So from the very beginning, I decided to completely break the rule of tacit understanding in the company. So I decided to continue to play the role of Tekken project leader, which was not directly related to my original duties, and proceeded with the development as an independent team, with independent decision-making as a team beyond the boundaries of the company or organization, with the team members who became a separate company. This move was very much disliked by the publisher department heads and have been very uncomfortable with it. Yeah, he hated me so much. Yes, as mentioned above, we Tekken Project are called a group of outlaw. So we survived as the only group with independent decision-making the great tide of group companies, now recognized as an official organization. If there was one major difference between Project Soul and the other companies, this is the only one. There are many titles that have disappeared over the course of the past transitions. There are no obvious villains in that history. They are all being chipped away in the course of a larger trend. However, I think me and the Tekken Project were evil in the eyes of the group companies. In Tekken, Heihachi and Kazuya say, "A fight is about who's left standing, nothing else." And this line used to be my motto. I kept this in mind throughout our rivalry with SoulCalibur, and even when the market for 3D fighting games was becoming increasingly competitive, I continued to tell my team, no matter how you do it, the last one standing wins. And this motto remained unchanged even in the midst of the major trends that occurred within the group companies. I understand that there were some board members who were not happy about it, and I received quite a few complaints. So we were never obedient, but always a wicked group with a strong will. I've realized through these experiences that unfortunately I probably have a bad personality. I think this is the only difference between Tekken Project and Project Soul. I think that the fact that the number of members who have the drive to keep the title alive, and even if they had to jump through all kinds of pressure, decreased as the organization changed. And that's one of the aspects of weakened Project Soul little by little. I'm not saying that it's all, but it's a big factor. What happened due to organizational policy, not individual problems. But from my point of view, I don't think the fire of Project Soul has been extinguished. There's still a few people in the company who have the will to do it. I would like to believe that they are just not united now. So I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit vindicated by Harada's thoughts, and I've been one to trash the executives and make these decisions for a long time. I've always been under the financial end of things instead of just like how things are supposed to be done, because I know that's not realistic, and I get a lot of pushback for my opinions on that. A lot of people are like, well, who are these mysterious like figureheads? Like, who are these board members? Like, who are these executives? Who are these financiers that you keep mentioning and talking about, as if this isn't the way companies and businesses are ran all over the world? So I do agree with him. There are a lot of instances that I found enlightening about this, especially the fact that SoulCalibur and Tekken had such heated rivalries, which is why I also think nobody should really go to Harada when it comes to SoulCalibur. And I think this rebuttal is more of a love letter to that, if anything else, telling him that his baby is Tekken even when it's not supposed to be, and as much as he respects SoulCalibur, he's no longer a part of that, and he's distancing himself from SoulCalibur, but he sees other people within the company that still, their souls burn and want to keep this going. So that tells me that there's not so much more of an inclination of goodwill or good faith, but the fact that like people within the company are still trying to push for this and are probably still making it right now, but like Harada has nothing to do with that unless it actually gets published, in which case then he'll be the head of the esports division for that thing, such as one of his job titles. So the difference between like organizational leaders and the actual development team is something I touch on a lot. I say all the time that there's factors that are outside of their provisions that they actually necessarily can't help. The marketing and the leaders and the developers are far and away different entities, and this is like definitely prominent when it comes to things like battle passes and microtransactions and stuff like that. That's usually a decree by publisher. It's not a decree by developer, and they're forced to institute these kind of things at the behest of their bosses, which are the publisher, which also have their own financial bosses when it comes to also. So not even just like the lobbyists or anything that the financiers that actually like put together the money for these projects, but they're working within their budget, and then they have to work with the marketing staff who also gets a slice of that budget, and then also the other things that keep falling down into place. So he's right when it's not just one person's like fault or responsibility, which is why I never post the blame on anybody. It's usually the direction of the actual company in which they're trying to go in the first place. And he is right about like the business differences between like North America and the East, but not so much in its subtlety that's the way that he tried to say it, because like here it's a similar situation, a similar notion. As somebody who's worked in retail for a long time, who no longer does, when you would go to get like a new district manager for, let's say, GameStop, that person was not necessarily an expert on games or even GameStop itself. It's usually like another district manager making a lateral move from like Walgreens or CVS that literally was just in that place because of their business practices, and usually their adherence to company policy is a big thing. It's not necessarily that they actually know what they know, because if you even go into a Walmart and you see like the coaches walking around, most of those coaches don't even know how to run a register, let alone tell you how the operations of the store are. They're there as pretty much figureheads to dictate to the lower people where they should go and what they should do, which is what management usually is all about. It's not about like how well you can do a certain given thing, it's how well you can actually pass on the company's wishes to the lower employees and have them do it, because like mutiny is a thing. So in the East, there's a lot less of that. It's more about like hard work and passion also, but like they're going down career paths that are almost forced on them because they're supposed to go into management or middle management or upper management, as opposed to staying in development hell, which is what they would call it. So like them literally just like being developers is looked down upon as like not being a proper career path. And I think it's the same here in the West as well. It's like most people, when you go into a retail store or you go into a movie set or anything like that, they're not talking to, you know, the boom mic guy. They're not talking to the editors who proofread the scripts. They're talking to the directors, they're talking to the producers, they're talking to the executives. And those are the people that always have the power. So yes, my soul still burns. Yes, I still believe that SoulCalibur 7 is happening. I don't think that this has any inclination to or for or against what is happening with SoulCalibur. It's just Harada talking about, you know, pretty much why he's tired of being tied directly to one thing or another in Tekken, because basically Tekken and SoulCalibur are two different entities within the same company. So whether or not he considers himself an outcast or a bandit outlaw who's like just doing his own thing in the Wild West, what remains to be seen is that like games in this day and age are being dictated by the publishers and not by the developers, and this is what we all know to be true, which is why a lot of games are not as good as they used to be. But anyway, that's gonna be my video for today. I hope you guys found it interesting. At least give me your thoughts in the comment section down below, or hop over on the Discord to continue the conversation there. And as I always say, guys, I love it. Thank you.
And thank you.